I've been experimenting with a unique take on an RTS style game, and it's been way too long since I've shared any progress. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Mike. I've been making games for 8 years now, and this is my latest project. Being a longtime fan of World of Warcraft, this game draws inspiration from it while molding those elements into a system where you control all the heroes in their respective roles. Since there aren't many games with this approach, it's been challenging to reference how others made it work, but I've been really enjoying testing out different ideas for the game. This game has definitely gone through multiple iterations, and in this video, I'll show you guys how things have evolved and where the game stands now. I know it's been a while since my last update, and I do apologize. If you've been following my game dev journey, I'll have a quick update at the end for you guys. I started out development by creating a small mini game just to test out multitasking and obstacle avoidance. I really just wanted to see if something like this would be fun or if it would just be way too stressful. Eventually, I structured it around the traditional World of Warcraft dungeon team, where you have a tank, a healer, and a couple DPS. I added a capsule boss that had some simple attack mechanics that you had to avoid. Testing this out, it actually was kind of fun. Next, I moved to create a dungeon layout with a boss fight at the end and ended up turning it into a playable demo. I sent this to a bunch of people I thought would be the target audience, and with some decent feedback on the idea, I decided to keep pursuing it. Feeling more confident in the game's direction, it was time to start figuring out how all the surrounding pieces were going to start fitting together. One major decision I struggled with was how death would work. After considering how each choice would shape the game, I settled on a permadeath system and started looking into how other games approached it. Darkest Dungeon stood out as a great reference. Since it features a 4-man team with permadeath, this seemed like a perfect game to borrow ideas from. I really liked how they handled progression and scaling, and I decided to adopt a similar format for my game. So far, it seems like a great fit. For the core of the game, I want it to be pretty straightforward. Engaging encounters where positioning, micro, and strategy carry significant weight for victory. How you set up your team composition, ability choices, and gear loadout will give you small advantages in a particular fight. I'm really aiming to avoid overly complex talent or progression systems, though there will be a steady power curve as you progress and acquire better gear and resources. Ideally, I want bosses to be beatable through refined strategy rather than forcing players to grind for better gear. Gear and upgrades will still be needed to hit a minimum gear threshold, since as you progress, enemies will naturally get stronger. Being geared should just provide more wiggle room for errors and allow you to fight longer, but not override mechanics. Easier said than done, but that's the goal. Currently, the game is in a playable state with most of the systems implemented and working. My main focus right now is to just finish the first region and all the supporting systems to prepare for another playtest. Progressing the game any further will just be building on top of this foundation, so it's important to make sure that this game loop is solid. Audio and UI are probably the furthest behind. While UI is often best done last, I still do want a cleaner version for the demo. UI is definitely my least favorite part of game dev. I've also used some AI generated art as placeholders for now. This was just a quick way to get something decent looking. I'm not going to speculate on when the demo will be ready, since my time to work on this has been limited and I've just kind of been enjoying the process, but I do promise it's on the top of my to-do list. How level progression in dungeons would work has also changed a bit. At the start, I created a dungeon generator that created 4 directional layouts. You would work your way through the maze. Some rooms would have a vendor for gear or a mini event, and at the end would be a boss fight. This was a fun system to code, but playtesting, I felt like this just wasn't the direction I wanted to go with the game. Eventually, I decided on the current level progression. The map will be a collection of different regions. Each region will have a random dungeon unlocked that will be kind of like the bread and butter for gearing and leveling units. where the final room will have mechanics to do or solve some sort of puzzle instead of a boss fight. Clearing dungeons will unlock contracts for the boss fights in the region. I do have one larger scale level set up. Currently it's my intro dungeon, but I just wanted to test out a WoW style dungeon map just to see how it felt. I do really like it, however, they do take a lot of effort to set up. Since enemies on this map have range-based aggro and some have patrol routes, I feel like it's a good change from the room-based combat where enemies just spawn in. The lobby has also undergone a few changes. Initially, I envisioned a camp that upgraded over time, allowing players to move around and interact with the different stations. However, again, after testing, I decided to transition to a more streamlined lobby layout, also inspired by Darkest Dungeon. This required a bit of changes to pretty much everything, but since things are still evolving, I haven't dedicated too much time in final designs. The drag and drop system was particularly challenging to implement, but after more time than I'd like to admit, it finally functions as needed. The new lobby I think looks pretty good. I do plan on adding more NPCs, which might require a layout adjustment. Unit design has evolved significantly, from improving navigation and controls to finalizing character models. Unit control is one area I'm constantly trying to improve on. I feel like this area just needs to feel the best. Currently it feels okay. It's definitely come a long way, but still has a lot of room for improvement. To keep scope manageable, units will have armor improvements at certain level milestones. If you're interested in the models I'm using, I'll provide a link down below. This is my first time using assets from this artist, but they look really good and they have a large number of animations for them. A little bit expensive, but so far worth it. Currently, I just have 4 unit types. I plan to add more, but this lineup works pretty well for testing. If you have any suggestions for a new class, let me know down below. Maybe some abilities it might have. I always love hearing suggestions. Enemy and boss design is by far my favorite part of game development. I always find myself getting carried away creating new mechanics, so designing a game around this focus is perfect. Currently, I have a handful of basic enemy types. I have 2 tier 2 mobs which have their own mechanics that you need to avoid. I have 1 enemy that runs around and throws stun grenades everywhere. There's 3 boss fights that are mostly focused on positioning and micro, and 1 final boss fight that has a set of unique mechanics. I'm really excited to just focus on creating a bunch of new bosses and different mechanics, but for now I really have to focus on catching the rest of the game up. Loot has definitely been tricky to balance and figure out. Initially, I tried dungeon specific loot that reset after each run, basically a slot machine for gear. After testing, I really didn't like this idea, so I went with a more traditional system. Borrowing again from Darkest Dungeon, I implemented a gear shop. I also made gear persistent, so you can take it with you when you leave the dungeon. Gear drops from enemies and serves as a reward for completing dungeons and bosses. I'm also considering a loot buyback system to recover gear, or just having items degrade each time after a death. Runes are something I'm currently mapping out. These will add a passive effect or boost to your special abilities. I think these could be really fun in expanding unit gear outs. Overall, I'm happy with the game's direction. I've been having a lot of fun making it. I think that's the most important. The core gameplay loop is taking shape, and the feedback so far has been encouraging. Again, the main goal going forward is to just try and get it into your guys' hands. What's up, guys? I'm really sorry it's been so long since the last upload. A lot of things have been changing, but finally it seems like they're calming down a bit. The biggest change is about 4 months ago, I was offered a pretty good opportunity in my old line of work, and as much as I didn't want to do it, it really didn't make sense to pass up. Although I'm back to working a ridiculous amount of hours and has really cut into my dev time, I still have been finding ways to progress the game. YouTube was just something I decided to pause on just to not fully burn out, but as things at work are slowing down, I should be able to upload more consistently. Once the work at my job is done, I plan to return back to full-time game dev, unless somehow I can line up a game dev job. I have been increasing my search for those lately, but it still seems like the market is a tad bit slim. I do believe it is improving though. This game has just been really fun to make, and I'm still motivated as ever. I'm not sure what the future will be for this game, but I found myself back in that groove where I'm just making things that I enjoy and not putting so much pressure on myself to rush towards a new game to release. I just really want to take my time and make this game into something special. As always, I really appreciate all the support that you guys have given me. If you want to follow more along, you can join the Discord. I don't really post too much on there, but I always try to reply to people. But that's about all I have for you guys today, and I'll see you on the next one.